Welcome to this explainer. Let's take a second and really think about this. Have you ever wondered why real change is just so incredibly difficult? Or why we can consume endless amounts of information, read all the right books, and yet we often remain exactly the same? Well, today we are exploring a lost, ancient concept that answers exactly that. We're talking about Hexis, the true blueprint of character and action. So get comfortable, because understanding this deep architecture of human behavior, it just might change how you view literally every single action you take from this moment forward.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to answer this honestly for yourself. Do you know what to do, but you simply aren't doing it? The source material we are looking at today calls this out right out of the gate. It states that if you've ever noticed that agonizing gap between what you know you should do and what you are actually doing, well, you are exactly the kind of person this is for. And honestly, that is such a powerful validation, isn't it? I mean, we constantly beat ourselves up over this gap. We think it's a personal failing or a total lack of willpower, or we convince ourselves that we just haven't found the right life hack yet. But what if the problem isn't your willpower at all? What if the issue is that we fundamentally misunderstand how human behavior actually works? You are definitely not alone in this frustration. In fact, you're experiencing a symptom of a much larger cultural blind spot.
To really understand that blind spot, we have to look at the world we live in right now. We live in a contemporary society that has completely lost a vital distinction. We are practically drowning in information, right? You can sit perfectly still on your couch reading a dozen books on leadership, binge watching tutorials on habit formation, and listening to experts talk about productivity all day long. And because of this, most adults today have substantial knowing. We are incredibly intellectually equipped. We know exactly what a healthy diet looks like. We know how to communicate effectively. We know how we should act. But despite all that knowing, we have a severe lack of practical execution. We have an underdeveloped aspect of ourselves that the ancient Greeks called Hexis. We've basically prioritized the accumulation of facts while completely starving the actual mechanics of change.
This brings us to an absolutely fundamental insight from Aristotle. He made a brilliant distinction that we desperately need to recover today. He drew a hard line between knowing what is good and actually being good. You see, knowing is purely intellectual. It's a passive state of the mind. You can acquire knowing without ever moving a single muscle. Being good, on the other hand, is an active state of your character. It is an entirely different category of human experience. When we just consume information, we're merely building up our intellectual knowing. We're just stacking facts in a passive mind. But Aristotle recognized that simply knowing a virtue does not make you virtuous, just like knowing exactly how a piano works doesn't magically make you a musician. So, the crucial point is, how do we actually bridge that gap? That is where this defining word comes into play, Hexis. Aristotle defined Hexis as the developed condition of the soul that comes only from repeated action across years. Let that sink in for a second. The developed condition of the soul. Picture two students in ancient Greece. One student stands at the Lyceum, listening to these brilliant lectures, nodding along, entirely passive. Now that student gains knowledge, for sure, but the other student? They go out and actually labor through the daily practice of what was taught, wrestling with it in their physical actions, day after day, year after year. That second student is developing Hexis. It's not a switch you can just flip. It's a physical and spiritual architecture that you have to build brick by brick through the actual friction of doing.
What's truly fascinating here is the timeline of these two concepts. Intellectual knowing is practically instantaneous. You can read a sentence, have a sudden aha moment, and boom, you know something you didn't know a second ago. It's fast. It's immediately gratifying. But the condition of your soul, your Hexis, that requires the slow, heavy labor of time and action. You absolutely cannot outthink a lack of action. You can't read your way into being a patient person. You can't simply decide intellectually to be courageous. True character demands heavy, slow labor. Let's just take a brief pause right here and really let that heavy realization land. To change who you are, you have to surrender your desire for a quick fix and commit to the long labor of action.
And you know, this concept of Hexis wasn't just some isolated theory dreamed up by Aristotle in a vacuum. What is so amazing is that this is a truth discovered by widely separated cultures all throughout history. We are looking at convergent ancient traditions forming this unified chorus. Think about it. When human beings in completely different parts of the world, speaking different languages, living under entirely different belief systems, all look deeply at the problem of human nature and all come up with the exact same solution, we need to pay attention. They all realize that intellectual knowledge alone was fundamentally insufficient for transforming a human life.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point. When we look across distinct global traditions, the pattern is just undeniable. We have Aristotle emphasizing daily application. We have Benedictine monastics structuring their entire lives around a rigid, repeating schedule of prayer and work known as the daily office. Over in the East, Confucian students dedicate themselves to the precise daily performance of rituals, and Buddhist monastics commit to the unbroken daily practice of continuous mindfulness. These are incredibly diverse traditions, right? Yet they all map out the exact same mechanism for shaping the soul. None of them said, hey, just read this scroll and you'll be perfect. They all instituted rigorous daily habits. They recognized that the human soul is malleable, but it only bends to the force of continuous daily practice.
So how do we practically apply this to our own modern lives? Well, the mechanics of change follow 3 clear steps. Step 1 is intellectual knowing, which is where you are right now, and it's a totally necessary starting point. You have to know what direction to head, obviously, but to actually cross the bridge to step 3, which is Hexis, you must rely on step 2, the law of repetition. It is the mundane, totally unglamorous, everyday choice to do the thing you know you should do over and over and over again, until it becomes woven into the very fabric of who you are. Which brings us to a powerful, definitive realization from the source material. We are not designed to be transformed by mere information. We are designed, at our absolute core, to be shaped by what we repeatedly do. This isn't just some trendy modern productivity hack. This is the universal truth of our human design. When you embrace this deep architecture, you stop feeling so guilty for not changing instantly after reading a book, and you start respecting the deep, steady process of building your character through daily action.
We've reached the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you with a challenge that cuts right through all the theory we just talked about. You now have the intellectual knowing. You understand Hexis, so the time for merely accumulating knowledge has to end. What single action will you repeat today? Don't pick 10 things. Pick one small, physical action you can take today, tomorrow, and the day after that to begin laboring toward the character you actually want. Because ultimately, this is our human blueprint.